The snow fell harder than I had ever seen in my life, blanketing the world in a suffocating silence, smothering every sound except for the howling of the wind and the crunch of frost beneath my boots as I stood there on the porch, staring into the glowing warmth of the house that I was no longer welcome in. My breath fogging against the frozen glass, my body trembling in a way that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with the bitter, merciless cold that wrapped around me like a noose, tightening with every passing second. While inside, I could see my family basking in the golden light of the living room, fire crackling in the hearth, glasses clinking, laughter echoing out into the night, a cruel contrast to the torment they had cast me into. My mother's face was the last I had seen before the heavy door slammed in my face. Her lips curled into a smirk, her voice dripping with venom as she said, "If you can't respect us, then freeze out there. Maybe you'll finally learn your place." That place, in her eyes, was beneath her. Beneath them all. A perpetual servant to their pride. A puppet whose strings they had pulled since the day I was born. My father had not spoken a word, his silence louder than any insult, his indifference cutting deeper than the icy wind. He had merely poured himself another glass of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light like a mocking flame as if to say my suffering was not worth interrupting his comfort. My brother and sister had not bothered to hide their amusement. They had sat there, mugs of steaming hot chocolate in their hands, staring at me through the glass as if I were some pathetic stray animal scratching at the window for scraps, their laughter piercing through the thick barrier, carrying out into the night air with merciless cruelty, every chuckle another dagger in my chest. I could still see my sister's face, her perfect little smile twisted with malice, her hand pressed flat against the window as she mouthed the words I would never forget. Die out there. Nobody cares. The argument that led to this hell had begun hours earlier, or maybe only minutes. It was impossible to tell anymore. Time had become a blur of rage and humiliation. It had started with me finally standing up to them, finally finding the courage to say I would no longer live my life shackled to their plans, their suffocating expectations that had strangled every dream I had dared to voice. They had mocked me, ridiculed me, spat words like ungrateful, failure, disappointment, each one heavier than the last. And when I told them I would not bend anymore, would not bow to their suffocating control, my brother had risen in a flash of anger, shoving me with a force that sent me stumbling back, my heart pounding, my pride shattering as the family I had once trusted revealed just how little I meant to them. My mother had seized that moment, barking the command that sealed my fate, ordering me out of the house, her voice sharp as a blade. They had taken my phone, locked the door, turned up the music, and drowned me out with their celebration, as though my suffering were nothing more than a background noise they could silence at will. The cold wasted no time in claiming me. It seeped through the thin fabric of my clothes, crawling across my skin like icy fingers, numbing me from the outside in. My hands trembled violently, my fingers losing all feeling, my lips cracked and bled from the dry, frigid air, my chest burned with each breath, the frozen wind slicing into my lungs as though I were inhaling shards of glass. I stomped my feet desperately to keep the blood flowing, to stop myself from collapsing right there on the wooden porch. But it was a losing battle, the relentless winter determined to drag me down. My eyes stung as I blinked through the snowflakes, trying not to look at the window, trying not to see the family I still, against all reason, loved sitting in comfort while I was left to rot. But my gaze betrayed me, flickering again and again toward the glow inside, to the sight of their shadows moving across the curtains, the sound of their laughter echoing across the frozen silence, cruel and mocking. At one point I banged on the door, my fists striking the wood with what little strength I had left, the sound muffled by the storm. "Please," I whispered, though my voice was hoarse, carried away by the wind before it could even reach their ears. "Please, let me in." I struck the door again, harder this time, the sound rattling through my numb bones. But there was no mercy. Inside, the music swelled louder, glasses clinked again, laughter boomed, and I realized with a sinking heart that they had heard me. They had heard me, and they had chosen to ignore it, to leave me out there to die like a dog abandoned by its master. The hours dragged on, though each second felt like a lifetime. The snow piled higher, coating my shoulders, my hair, my lashes, turning me into a frozen statue that shivered and shook beneath the weight of betrayal. My thoughts blurred, fractured by the cold, memories flashing through my mind in feverish fragments. Birthdays where I was always the forgotten one, dinners where my voice was drowned out by their mockery, holidays where I gave gifts that were laughed at, belittled, shoved aside. All the moments I had buried came surging back, cruel reminders that this night was not an accident, not a sudden cruelty, but the inevitable conclusion of years of disdain. They had never loved me, not truly, not as a family should. I had been convenient when they needed someone to blame, someone to control, someone to use as a stepping stone for their own pride. But when I dared to break free, I was nothing to them, nothing. My body began to shut down. Whether from exhaustion or the creeping hand of death, I couldn't tell. My knees buckled, sending me sprawling into the snow, the frozen ground biting into my skin through the thin layer of fabric. My face pressed against the ice, and for a moment I thought of just staying there, letting the cold consume me, letting it take me away from the pain of betrayal, from the agony of knowing my family, the people who were supposed to protect me, were the ones who wanted me gone. My vision blurred, colors bleeding together, the glow of the house flickering like a cruel mirage in the distance. I could still hear their laughter faintly, muffled now, as though I were sinking deeper and deeper into a void where sound could no longer reach me. My breaths came shallow, ragged, each one a struggle. I tried to move my fingers, to push myself up, but they no longer obeyed. I was a prisoner in my own failing body. In those final moments of consciousness, I thought not of forgiveness, not of reconciliation, but of betrayal, sharp and searing in my chest. I thought of my mother's smirk, my father's silence, my brother's shove, my sister's whispered curse. I thought of the warmth I had once believed was love, now revealed as poison. My last thought, as the darkness crept in and the cold claimed me, was bitter and hollow, not of death itself, but of the cruel truth that the people who should have loved me most had wanted me gone, had chosen to watch me die while they laughed in the warmth of the home I had once called my own. When I woke, it wasn't heaven or hell that greeted me, but the sterile white ceiling of a hospital room, the steady beeping of a heart monitor, the faint smell of antiseptic, and the heavy weight of blankets pulled over my body as though I had already been buried beneath snow. For a moment, I thought I had crossed into some strange limbo, but the sharp ache in my fingers, the burning sting in my chest when I tried to breathe, and the numb heaviness of my legs reminded me I was still very much alive, though barely, as if life itself had decided to mock me by keeping me tethered to this world when my own family had chosen to abandon me to death. A nurse hovered nearby, her expression caught between pity and professionalism, and when she saw my eyes flutter open, she gasped softly and hurried to my side, adjusting the tubes and wires that tethered me to the machines, keeping my fragile body from slipping away again. "You're lucky," she whispered, her voice soft as if speaking too loudly might shatter me. "You were found just in time." Lucky, that word hung in the air like a cruel joke, because what kind of luck was it to survive the night my family had condemned me to? What kind of fortune was it to wake and realize the people who shared my blood had laughed while I froze? And what kind of mercy was it that I now had to live with the knowledge that their love had been nothing but a lie? I turned my head weakly, my throat raw, as I croaked a single question that weighed heavier than all the machines attached to me. "Did they come?" The nurse's smile faltered, her eyes shifting with the kind of hesitation people wear when they don't want to deliver a truth that will crush the soul. And then she shook her head gently, placing a warm hand over mine as if her touch could fill the void their absence had carved into me. Not once had they called. Not once had they asked. Not once had they cared. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of pain and recovery. Endless tests and medications, my body fighting to repair itself from the frostbite that gnawed at my fingers and toes, from the hypothermia that had nearly silenced my heartbeat forever. But through the haze, one thing burned brighter than any flame: rage. I replayed that night endlessly, the memory of golden light spilling from the house, the sound of their laughter echoing across the frozen silence, the way my sister mouthed the words, "Die out there, nobody cares," the way my father had turned his back, my mother's lips twisted into a smirk as she slammed the door, my brother's shove pushing me into a spiral of betrayal. Every scar my body carried became a mark of their cruelty. Every pang of pain a reminder that I had survived not because of them, but in spite of them. And that survival demanded more than mere gratitude. It demanded justice. Weeks passed before I could stand without trembling. Before the burning in my lungs eased enough to breathe deeply. Before the feeling returned to my fingers enough to grip a spoon or hold a pen. The doctors spoke of therapy, of patience, of acceptance. But I heard only the cold echo of my mother's voice, telling me to freeze, telling me to learn my place. My place. That word became poison on my tongue, because my place was not in their shadow, not beneath their heel, not at the mercy of their cruelty. My place was yet to be carved out, sharp and merciless, by my own hand. So when I was finally discharged, I didn't return to that house, to that family who had celebrated my suffering. I vanished from their world, slipping into silence like a ghost, but a ghost who would not rest, a ghost who would learn, build, and one day haunt. The world outside was not kind, but I embraced every hardship with the hunger of someone who had nothing left to lose. I took jobs nobody else wanted, sweeping floors, washing dishes, stocking shelves. Every blister, every ache, another reminder that I was rebuilding myself from nothing, brick by brick, stronger than before. I saved every coin, stretching meals into days, sleeping in cramped rooms with peeling paint and drafty windows, because comfort was no longer my goal. Power was. I studied in every spare moment, devouring books from libraries, watching, listening, learning about the systems that governed money, influence, and reputation. Knowledge became my weapon, sharper than any blade, and I honed it relentlessly, driven by the memory of their laughter, by the image of their warmth contrasted with my suffering. Years passed, and with them, the ghost of who I had been faded, replaced by something colder, sharper, unyielding. The scars on my fingers remained, pale reminders of the night I had nearly been claimed by the cold. But instead of shame, they became symbols of survival, of the fire that now fueled me. I no longer dreamed of simple revenge, of standing at their door and shouting accusations. No, my hunger had evolved into something far greater, something patient and precise. I wanted them to taste the same isolation I had endured, the same bitter cold, but not of winter's snow. No, I wanted them to feel the cold of abandonment, the frost of shattered reputations, the freeze of a world turning its back on them as they had turned theirs on me. So I began to gather information, secrets, weaknesses. My father, the proud man who once drank whiskey by the fire as I froze outside, was drowning in hidden debts he had kept buried from the neighbors, from his friends, from anyone who admired the mask of success he wore so tightly. My brother, the golden child who had shoved me without consequence, had clawed his way into a job through lies and deceit, and the illegal dealings he dipped his hands into were fragile glass waiting to be shattered. My sister, with her perfect smile and curated online presence, built her reputation on lies, a fragile house of cards that could collapse with the flick of truth. And my mother, the architect of that night's cruelty, the woman who had smiled as she condemned me to death, wore a mask of perfection, a reputation of kindness and charity that hid the monster lurking beneath. I uncovered each truth carefully, piece by piece, never rushing, never exposing myself. Because ghosts do not act recklessly. They haunt patiently, unseen, until the time is right to strike. They thought I had disappeared, perhaps even died, and in that belief they grew careless, secure in their lies. They celebrated holidays, posted pictures, smiled for the world, all while forgetting that the shadow they had cast out had survived, grown stronger, and was now watching from the darkness. And as I watched, I built myself into something unrecognizable, no longer the weak child begging at their door, but a figure cloaked in independence, resilience, and a hunger for justice that no storm could ever extinguish. And so I waited, biding my time as the seasons turned, as winters came and went. Each snowfall reminding me of the night they had left me to die, each chill in the air stoking the fire in my chest. I was not rushing, because revenge is not served hot. It is carved from patience, sharpened by time, and delivered with precision. One day, I promised myself, I would return to that house, not as the broken figure they had thrown into the snow, but as the storm they had created, the winter they thought had killed me, but instead had forged me into something far colder, far stronger, and utterly unstoppable. The day of reckoning came with snow, as if the very sky remembered what had been done to me years before, the flakes tumbling heavy and silent through the air, blanketing the streets in the same cold white that had nearly claimed my life. But this time I was not shivering. I was not broken. I was not the desperate figure begging at a locked door. I was a storm walking on two legs, a shadow reborn, my heart beating with calm precision as I approached the house that had once been both my prison and my grave. The house that glowed so warmly that night while I froze outside. The house that had sheltered my betrayers as they laughed at my suffering. The house that now stood like a monument to cruelty waiting to be toppled. They didn't recognize me at first when I appeared on the path, dressed sharply in a tailored coat, my shoes crunching against the snow with each deliberate step, my head held high, my eyes fixed not on the warm lights of the living room, but on the storm that was about to rip the mask off their lives. Inside, they were the same as they had always been. My father, with his glass of whiskey in hand. My mother perched like a queen with her air of superiority. My brother still loud and smug. My sister still preening with her perfect smile. And it struck me how little they had changed. How they had remained frozen in their arrogance while I had transformed, forged by suffering into something far colder and stronger than they could ever imagine. I stood at their door not as the outcast but as judgment itself. And when I finally knocked, it was not with desperation, but with the slow, thunderous rhythm of fate demanding entrance. My father opened it, his face weathered but his pride intact, his eyes narrowing as he took me in, recognition dawning too late to save him from the ruin already descending. He tried to sneer, to form the same words he had once wielded like weapons, but his voice caught when I leaned close and whispered, "The debts you thought hidden, they know." He froze, his grip tightening around his glass until the amber liquid sloshed over the rim, because in those words he heard the truth. I had exposed him. I had handed his unpaid loans and secret deals to the creditors and authorities. And soon men with badges and ledgers would come to strip him of the house he had once chosen over me. His jaw worked silently. But before he could speak, I pushed past him into the warmth that no longer stung me. A warmth that felt like a battlefield I now controlled. My mother rose immediately, her voice sharp, commanding me to leave, still clinging to her delusion of power. But I silenced her with a folder I laid on the table. Documents and recordings spilling across the polished wood, undeniable proof of her cruelty, her manipulations, her two-faced life that she paraded in front of the community while hiding the rot underneath. "Do you know what happens to a queen when the mask is torn away?" I asked quietly, my words cutting through her sputtering protests. "She is left naked before the court." Her face paled, her lips trembling as she realized that every lie she had built her reputation on would be shattered by dawn. The charities she fronted, the neighbors she charmed, the friends who worshipped her, all would turn cold when they saw what she truly was. My brother tried to laugh, tried to brush it all aside, but I turned on him with eyes as sharp as the blades of ice outside, sliding another set of papers across the table, emails, messages, transaction records that tied him to fraud, to theft, to illegal dealings he had thought buried under false names and clever schemes. His laughter died in his throat, his face draining of color as he scanned the proof, realizing his career, his pride, his so-called success would crumble in a matter of days, that the promotions he flaunted, the wealth he boasted, the respect he demanded would all be yanked away when the truth devoured him. He tried to bluster, to threaten, but his voice shook, and I merely leaned closer and whispered, "Do you remember shoving me into the cold? This is me returning the push." And then there was my sister, still smiling faintly, still trying to maintain her perfect composure, but I saw the flicker of fear in her eyes when I pulled out the last envelope, photographs and screenshots spilling out, evidence of the lies behind her curated image, her affairs, her hypocrisy, her secret cruelty that she thought would never surface. "Do you remember what you said through the glass?" I asked softly, my voice colder than the storm raging outside. "Die out there. Nobody cares. Tell me, how will it feel when the world you've fooled no longer cares for you? When they see the truth of what you are and turn away?" Her hand shot out to grab the papers, but I snatched them back, savoring the panic that cracked her perfect smile into shards of fear. They all began to speak at once then, their voices a cacophony of denial, of pleas, of anger, but I stood unmoved, a figure carved of ice, letting their desperation wash over me without effect. And then, in the brief silence that followed, I spoke the words I had carried like a flame in my chest all these years. Do you remember that night? The night you left me to die in the cold while you laughed inside. Tonight I'm not the one left in the cold. You are. They fell silent, the truth slamming into them harder than any storm, and I turned my back on them just as they had once turned their backs on me. Walking out into the snow as headlights pierced the night, as the sheriff's car pulled up to the curb, as neighbors gathered at the edge of the street, whispering, pointing, watching the perfect family's facade crack and crumble before their eyes. The house behind me was no longer a symbol of warmth, but of ruin. Its glow a false beacon that could not shield them from the cold justice closing in on every side. I left them with nothing. No home, for it would be seized. No wealth, for it would be claimed. No reputation, for it would be shattered. No pride, for it would rot under the weight of exposure. Only the bitter cold of a world that no longer pitied them remained, a fitting mirror of the night they had forced me into the snow. I walked away without looking back, the storm swirling around me, but for the first time in years, I felt warmth, not from fire, not from family, but from the justice I had carved with my own hands, the justice that had been denied me that night. Revenge had been my only companion, cold and constant, and now it had delivered me peace. The night they left me to die had birthed a storm, and I was its unrelenting winter, a winter they would never escape, a winter that would haunt them forever, while I walked free into a new dawn, no longer the victim, no longer the outcast, but the storm that had broken its chains and remade the world in its image.